So Dave, thanks for coming on and talking to us. Just a quick
No
one.
worries. Welcome to the conservatory, which is home now.
I know. So. Since when were you a mascot?
Yeah, that was back in the day when England came to Colchester, and when they leave, they just leave stuff behind. So my kids were both young at the time, so we put up one of the doors. So it was the mascot meeting point. So
Go for it.
Yeah, nice little steal, that one. Thanks to the FA.
Brilliant. So at the moment you're running the Performance Scientists Association. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, the whole idea about setting up the Association for Performance Scientists in Sport was to try and fill the gap which has been kind of left in terms of representing the group as a whole. Each of the subdisciplines of performance or sports science, whatever you want to call it, whether that's strength and conditioning, nutritionists, psychologists, performance analysts, sports scientists themselves. We talk about having a multidisciplinary team when we work in organizations, yet the first thing we do when we have to work is we go into back into our silos, back into our own individual associations. And that's not a bad thing, of course. It's important that people are able to discuss all of the disciplines among groups of like-minded, or potentially not like-minded, but at least people within the same discipline. However, we also have to work together, and probably trying to encourage everyone to come together to share experiences, share knowledge, build a network, to use that phrase, but really bring us all back together. And there's a lot of power that we can have as a group of people if we come together. Whereas when we're a little bit distant and working just for our own ends, we may lose that ability to influence the organizations we work with, the employers, and other interested parties and stakeholders who may need to realize that actually we're a big part of their community now. So that was the whole idea about kind of creating this as an association. It launched not as a fee paying or anything. It launched as a website on a Friday night as a soft launch, a test if it worked. And within 2 days, we had 1,000 people now following us on Twitter. So It's running away with itself. No,
definitely. I think at the moment, these are unprecedented times. These are unusual times.
Maybe a 10 press up, fine for saying the word unprecedented.
Put me on the fines list. No, these are strange times for everyone involved in every industry. But in sport, we've seen a lot of changes. I'm wondering where that leaves performance scientists. We use that sort of generalized term of the people that you've covered there. Where does that leave us in sport in the future? Because there's a lot of uncertainty out there. Nobody seems to know, when seasons will restart, if they'll restart, how they're going to restart. So that kind of gives us the question: is what do we think is going to happen? And because I think it would be true to say that sometimes performance staff are seen as disposable.
I don't know if performance staff have been seen as disposable, because there's certainly a lot of evidence that performance staff growth among leagues and even within clubs has probably been exponential over the last 6 years or so. You've seen, certainly since the EPPP in English football, you've seen a lot more staff who are now within organisations. And that trend has, I think, continued around the world. You only have to look at the AFL, and you look at the amount of staff that might be within one team. So there's certainly been a lot of performance staff taken on in recent times. Where I think there could be some interesting discussions in the future. We've just seen today one League Two club in England who has released players. They've released players from their contracts, which are, of course, time limited contracts. They're on fixed term contracts, and they've released players. So they're looking to potentially offload players almost before staff. So that's going to be an interesting development to watch. Will that spark a trend of clubs shaving squad costs first because they know they could potentially get away with two less members of the playing staff, whereas they can't really do with an awful lot less of the performance staff. Colchester is an example where there might be only one or two performance staff in the whole club. At the top end of the game, I think it's going to be a time where, yeah, there's going to be concern over jobs, and departments are probably going to get smaller, and now is probably not the time to be a specialist in one discipline, because clubs are going to look to maintain and retain staff who have generalist skills. And certainly it's been my opinion for a number of years that we've certainly seen a big rise in the number of people with doctorates, and those being in very specialist areas. And of course, when it comes to times like these, and you may have to rationalize your staff, you're going to need people who can spin a lot of plates and maybe work across a lot of disciplines. And it's going to be a testing time. You know, people who've worked together for a long period could find that they're no longer working together, and it becomes pretty much dog eat dog.
Yeah.
How much value can you add over and above your current position? So it's going to be a difficult time for those making decisions as to how they make those decisions. Is it going to be based on salary? Is it going to be based on competency, experience, value? You know, there's lots of things people are going to have to weigh up.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Value. Football is a business, or soccer here in the US is a business. You know, we accept that, but actually value is probably one of the things that that people will look at. How much value, without any bias, do you think that performance staff give? How much value do you think that we give to that team? I could answer that myself, but I won't. But I think
okay.
It's an interesting, for me, it's an interesting question of where we're possibly perceived within clubs.
Well, I suppose it's going to be a sliding scale, isn't it? You know, from those people who've got a lot of experience are potentially going to be more valuable because they can obviously lean on that experience, cover a lot of bases. They know what's important. You'd like to think they know the value of different types of interventions, different types of data. They can change hats maybe a lot more easily because they've got the experience. You know, and that's going to also come down to the fact that we're going to see decisions having to be made about technology partners. Will you keep the GPS or will you keep the member of staff? Mm-hmm. You know, that might be a decision you have to make. You know, we're not going to renew this year's contract or take out another 3-year contract because I want to keep a member of staff within the organization. So certainly the more experienced practitioners will have lived in a time before GPS, and therefore with the additional benefits of having worked with GPS can transition back probably a lot easier. The other side is going to be, well, what do you value as a performance discipline? You know, is nutrition more important to you than S&C? Is sports science and that type of testing and monitoring more important than the work that the psychologist does? So each organization and institution is going to have to judge on its merits. But certainly I think there's the sliding scale of being experienced is going to be more beneficial. Being a generalist is going to be more beneficial. Having a wide range of capabilities, not only with tech, but with data management, data analysis, is only going to be beneficial to people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know you're highly experienced, Dave. I'll be right in saying 22 years.
Yeah, and that's just football.
But I think you're right. I mean, So a sports science degree is generalist. There's many disciplines, sub-disciplines, etc. We've heard recently about generalist specialists. How much specialisation have you seen over the years within performance staff in football?
Well, certainly it exists more at the top end of the game because you may have the budget to allow you to engage with more specialists. I suppose you could have an argument with, and this is certainly an argument that's happened in the past around titles, is, you know, are we fitness coaches? Are we sports scientists? The strength and conditioning has become the terminology now to almost describe what were sports scientists and fitness coaches before. So, I mean, it could be semantics, but I know there are S&C coaches who see themselves as S&C coaches, and you know, any flirtation into nutrition or flirtation into sports science would be done by other people within the organization. Lower down, you've got to be able to do the stuff on the field, in the gym, on the computer, you know, advise on nutrition, be a psychologist. You have to do it all. So I'm not saying per se that everybody doesn't have the capabilities of doing that cross-fertilization across disciplines and be a generalist per se. But where you're in a large organization, you may have to stick to your lane a lot of the time and know that you are a specialist. That's the area you cover. You go deep in a very specific area. In terms of what you were mentioning before about degrees being generalist, there's also master's courses which can be generalist as well, you know, be that taught or part-time or a mix of that. But certainly I've noticed over the time that we have had more people who've specialized in roles, and S&C and nutrition would probably be two good examples of that. And also a lot of people who are doing, professional doctorates, which specialize in one particular thing. So it gives you a real depth of knowledge on a specific topic. But often we need applied practitioners who are able to break out of that. And of course, lots of people can do. But I think where you may have somebody who's got a wider base in their academic development. So they've not gone from taught course degree to very narrow doctorate, you know, with potentially very limited experience. And I don't mean experience in terms of years, but also levels and breadth across a club. So working from the under eights in the academy through to the first team, or working across top league down to lower leagues or even non-league, working across different populations, different sports. All those things are going to help in terms of developing your progression. And at this stage, if I was looking at it, I want somebody with the widest base possible to help me. If I've got somebody with a real narrow base of education, a real narrow base of experience, are those the people I need in the organization at the moment?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it is difficult because, like you say, we do have more specialists. You see a lot more PhD students within clubs, which is actually not a bad thing when that club has a question or you're dealing with multi-million pound assets, even into the billion assets. Then, you know, if there's a specific performance question, then master's PhD students is a good thing. On the back of that, what do you think? Where do you think the opportunities lie for undergraduates to sort of get into the game and as a sports scientist? Where specifically do you see those opportunities? I know internships are big, paid or not paid is probably another debate. But if there's anybody, and I know we've got quite a few students in the group who's looking to get into the game, what advice could you give them?
Again, it goes back to some of the previous things I said. You know, you have to get experience. You need as many experiences within that experience kind of bucket as you can get. You know, have you worked across sports levels, age ranges? You know, you need to fill that bucket as much as you can, so that you've got greater depth to be able to pull on from what you would do in each situation. If you've lived your whole life in academy world, knowing what the demands are of a first team environment can sometimes be a little bit alien to you. Similarly, if you haven't seen how the development cycle runs through an academy, so when you get them to first team, you know what's gone before. They're important things to develop. So you want to try and get all ends of that spectrum, both in terms of age range, level of the game. And again, as I say, a rush to a high level of academia excellence is not necessarily the best thing that's going to serve you in terms of a job. That can seem counterintuitive when you look at a lot of job specs and they're saying master's/doctorate is a requirement. And a little bit of that, I think, is the industry eating itself, because it can say, I want people with postgraduate qualifications, but that also doesn't give you the chance to mold people into jobs, which is, you may have somebody who's perfectly competent coming out of a certain institutions to give you what you need within an organization. You don't have to wait for the person who's got a postgrad, because some of the best guys I've worked with haven't had their postgraduate qualifications, but what they're able to do from spending some time doing the job is understand actually what the best route is for them to go with their academic career. So I think you don't need to almost cut yourself out and then wait for the cookie cutter to fit you. You can go in as a blank slate and then decide, right, what shape should I be for my future career? Because you can go into one organization and they will try and make you perfect for their organization, but that's not necessarily going to serve you well when you go somewhere else. So you sometimes have to think a little bit bigger than the box that you're in. As somebody says, if you're having to think outside the box too much, then you need a bigger box. You need to also think outside of the institution you're in to realize there's a big world out there, and not everything you're seeing right now is going to be a fair reflection of what you might need. So you can be an intern at Liverpool, Man United, Man City, do a great job, send your CV out to a League One club, and you don't have the skill sets that they need.
Yeah.
You might think it's madness, but similarly, we see players come out of those organizations and they can't cope with League One and League Two because they haven't toughened up, So it's the same for practitioners, I think.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Great points there. Okay, so one last question, or two last questions, really. So what next for the Performance Association, and where can people get hold of you for the association?
All right. Well, the second part is the easiest. I'm on Twitter quite regularly. If you're able to siphon or filter the family stuff, the social stuff that I just post on there, odd political view, I'll drop in the odd little piece of interesting bit on performance. Obviously, at this present time, I think there's an awful lot of noise out there. There's a webinar every 20 minutes. You just got to wait for the next one to turn up. And that's great in some ways. And it certainly was novel at the very start. But I think what we need to see if there's real quality and adding to the body of work rather than just filling time. So I think that's one thing. And performance scientists, where we were just about at the start of the coronavirus was we were preparing to launch in April. And probably I took the decision that now wasn't the time to be starting a paid membership of an association when people were going to need as much headspace as possible to just deal with whatever's going on. So we've sat back, we've supported people who've tried to push on with initiatives. So certainly with Steve Barrett at the start, I tried to help him as much as I could. with perspective. If one thing that time on task has taught me over these few decades is I might be able to drop in a odd bit of actually acquired knowledge and perspective. So what we're looking for is, once this all settles down, then I'd like to see how certainly the current associations have ended up supporting their practitioners. Have they done what the practitioners have expected, or have they served the need and then done nothing? And I think I'm forming an opinion on that now. And going forward, it's going to be a new dawn for all of us after this unprecedented time. Is we need to come together better as an industry. People are going to lose their jobs. People are going to be asking, where was our support at that time? The PFA have played a blinder for their members in terms of fogging the news. So, while a lot of performance staff have been furloughed and some are going to lose their jobs, many players and clubs at this stage have not made any kind of requirement of players and coaching staff to have to do the same. I know some clubs have, and that's fine. Personally, I don't buy the tax, all of the kind of the tax benefits that the players would be given the NHS. So I would like to make sure that in the future, the Performance Scientists Association would be there to support our members in a better way. However that might be, it's up to the members to decide how they want to be supported. But a few things there. I think we need to promote the industry better. We need to have better kind of self guidance on how we speak to each other in social media. So I think we need to protect our industry and the people in it, not only from losing a job, but from giving ourselves a bad name because we're backbiting at each other on social media. So yeah, between that, promotion and protection, and then really creating a space where people can learn better. And it's been fascinating over this time watching how people are starting to learn. They're getting into this idea of online webinars and conferences, and that could be good, but also we don't want to lose that ability to actually meet people.
No, I think I've thought about that a lot. Is that the end of conferences? But actually, I prefer that humanistic and personal element of actually going and meeting people. And I know we've met at various conferences, Dave. It's interesting, some of the stuff we touched on there, especially about the PFA. Obviously, they've come out and said that quite a lot of members have now got in touch over mental health and gambling and alcohol problems, but that doesn't cover the staff. And I think there's huge pressures on staff as well to continue the work they're doing under different circumstances. I nearly said unprecedented, but there we go, there's a fine. But no, Dave, I'll pay you in dollars. No, thanks very much, Dave. It's been a really interesting conversation for everybody in the Soccerology group, and best of luck with the Performance Scientists Association. And I thoroughly support it. I know we've spoke in its infancy about the association, and I think it's a great thing. And just having support of other members is an excellent initiative.
Yeah, and in some ways, so similar to Soccerology and what you've done there. You've got a healthy amount of members across different disciplines across the world. And it's great that people are taking these initiatives to try and help the industry. So I think all power to both of us. I think we're a force for good, or I'd like to think we're going to be a force for good within this industry, and pushing it forward. And with goodwill on all sides, we can certainly make a difference going forward. Once we get through this period, then there's certainly going to be an appetite for change. Some of it's going to be forced upon us. Others we can choose what we decide to do. So, all power to you, and good luck to your members. And if anybody ever wants any any time to talk, I'm always on the end of a Zoom call now, by the look of it. So
yeah, it's interesting. Well, you'll know as well as I did, Dave, that it used to be 2 paper cups on a bit of string, and that was a mobile phone back in the day.
we didn't even have we didn't even have string. We just had paper cups. You know, I had to shout in.
Good old
You must
Dundle.
have been really advanced up in Dublin, weren't you? God.
Listen, Dave, thanks very much. It's been a brilliant conversation, and thanks for your time.
No problem. Cheers, Andy.
Thanks, Dave.